So, recently within the last few days, the XDefiant beta was released and opened to the entire world for everyone to play, and I am ready to give my thoughts on everything that I experienced with it. Just as a general note, I do mean what I say when I go by the title of this video. I absolutely do hope that there is a developer or developers over at Ubisoft and XDefiant who see this video and take up on my feedback to heart. These are just my general thoughts and opinions, and I feel like honestly really helps in a situation like this, especially when we're talking about a game that the general conversation on the internet is that this could be the game that kills COD. For the most part, at least from what I've seen, it doesn't feel like enough people are talking about the bad of this game, which is a little concerning. But overall, you're probably going to find in my review that I actually don't think that that's going to be the case. But again, the point of this video is to discuss my thoughts, good and bad, so let's just jump right into it. I actually do want to start off with the good because I do have some very good things to say about the game overall. So there will probably be some comparisons to Call of Duty, so that's just a warning in case anyone gets annoyed by how much I do compare it to Call of Duty because, again, that is the one game that everybody is talking about the most with regards to XDefiant. So starting off with the first thing is that would be the menus and everything around the UI. I think it's pretty good so far. I really did just feel like I was looking at something that brought my old school feel to COD menus back to me. Nothing too insane and pretty simple as to something like this in the newer Call of Duty games where their menus are basically just filled to the brink with so many different settings. My only little nitpick I would change is that when, say in the practice zone, for example, and you can hit the start button to open up the menu. When you do that, you have the option to either change your faction loadout or leave the match. There should also be a tab there for settings, instead of just having it to the actual side on the right of the screen, where it just tells you what button to hit to actually open up the settings. Again, that's just a nitpick, and it would only go towards making it a little bit more neat. As a good segue, as a matter of fact, this leads into my next point, which is about the practice zone. I really like the developers added this in because it feels very in line with what I feel like most first-person shooter games should have. I mean, they allow you to go to a firing range to practice and warm up, an area to then go and practice your abilities for your specialists, and then also an actual assault course where you go and try out the actual combat style of the game. It's just a really cool, neat thing to add in there for someone who just wants to maybe get some practice in before they go into start playing some actual matches. Moving into the next thing, this actually leads into the gameplay part of what we got with the beta, which are the modes. So we only actually got to play 5, but of those 5, I think all 5 do a decent job at laying the groundwork of basically telling you that this game is not straying away from any different type of mode that you've ever seen before in other first-person shooter games. Something like zone control and domination and escort are pretty much standard modes that you've seen before. Same thing even with a mode like Occupy. The one that was kind of interesting was the Hotshot game mode, which is like a new spin on Kill Confirmed to where you are collecting bounties off players and it's team-based, so whoever on the team collects the most becomes an even better skilled player than anyone else on the map. It's a new take on something, so I appreciate that they tried to do something like that with that particular mode. When the full game launches, obviously I'm sure there will be plenty of more modes to play than just these 5. Moving on to the last part of the good, which again is gameplay related, are the maps. I actually kind of like the maps here that we got and we were able to play in the beta, and in particular, I'll point out one that I found to be the most interesting, which because it felt very small scale, but with the location it was in, it just felt good to play, which is the Times Square map. Basically, there is an actual map that you can play where you can run the streets of Times Square in New York City, which I found to be very interesting, and again, something different that I'm not used to playing in a multiplayer online shooter. You obviously have other maps like Arena, for example, or even one so funny by name like Nuddleplex. I kind of like that they went all out for that name. The beta had plenty of different maps to play overall, and I didn't find that any of them stood out as being like bad or unoriginal, even if there were times where it felt like there were a few that felt like they were the same thing, only in just a different location. I really like that they don't kind of force you into sticking to a 1 to 2 lane to 3 lane kind of system. It's kind of very free and open, and the last thing I'll mention is that I found that these maps to some degree were very colorful and not just dull and filled with dull tones in the color. I think almost every map should have something like that. It makes it more appealing and it makes you feel like you want to play that map every time it comes up in the map voting. Which, speaking of map voting, thank you XDefiant. thank you for putting that in your game, considering for some reason Call of Duty is just so allergic to the notion that map voting should even be a thing in their own game. Again, this notion that you give the player the ability to choose where they want to play, again, that's really good. You should have something like that in all your games. Although, I will say, now that I'm thinking about it, there is one thing that I thought could have been fixed, which is the idea of lobby disbanding. I'm assuming this might only be a beta thing, but I really hope that when the actual game comes out, there is no lobby disbanding, because I think that this is a really bad mistake that you could make for your game. Lobby disbanding should not be a thing no matter what kind of multiplayer game you are making. Trust me when I say that. It adds to the social community experience that you have with playing with other people. But of course, with all that being said, there are quite a few things that I do need to talk about with regards to the bad of the beta and what I'm hoping we don't see come the final release this summer. Also, in general, every one of my points here is going to relate to gameplay in some form or fashion, and nothing outside of it. So the first thing, I think maybe the most aggravating thing that I experienced with playing this beta, is that the time to kill and hit registration specifically are just not doing it for me. Like, I'm talking straight up. This goes to show that giving us a beta at this time was a really good idea, because there is a lot in the gameplay that needs to get worked on, and that starts with the time to kill and the hit registration. The hit registration is almost non-existent here in this game when you are shooting at somebody. There are times where I am shooting at a body and my bullets are just not hitting when they are supposed to be hitting. And into the point, the time to kill, when I'm hitting somebody, it's so laughably slow here. It really does feel like you're shooting somebody with armor, even though they don't even have any armor equipped, because there is no armor function in the game. They either need to lower the health of your player, or they just need to lower the time to kill just slightly enough to where it makes it feel like you're not just putting an entire clip into one person to kill them. And to be clear, this is not me saying that the game is too hard, or that they just need to make the game even quicker with regards to something like killing. I just think it needs to be more balanced. Balance is really important in a game like this, and right now I think you'll find that there are many areas of gameplay where it's not. And moving on to another area of gameplay that I feel is a little unbalanced is when you are shooting at range. Again, if we are comparing this to a game like Call of Duty, you can tell when you should be getting a kill at range when shooting at somebody. And here in this game, it feels like, again, it's just very unbalanced. There are times when I'm shooting somebody at range and they just should be dying, but they're not. To another point, I also think that this relates to the game really rewarding you for accuracy and being quick on the trigger with fast reaction time. For how fast-paced of a game that this is, you really, really need to be on a good enough level to where you could compete with other people in the lobby. Maybe in some cases for me personally, that might point to this game just not being something I would enjoy, but for people who do want to get into this game, I would suggest that you really try to focus on using that practice zone, for example, and making sure that you are well warmed up before going into matches. Moving on to the next point, again, this goes to my first few things that I said, but I feel the guns here are, at least for the most part, very weak and might need a little bit of a buff. Again, when we're talking about the balance of all these different systems here, I feel the developers really need to look at how to keenly balance how strong the guns are versus how much the time to kill is represented in how strong each gun is. For example, if there was one particular gun that I could point to that felt like it was balanced to what it should be, it would probably be the marksman rifles. I used the SVD a lot, and it felt pretty good for that type of weapon, even with how much of a kick it has when you shoot. I guess I would say if there was one thing I really do like about the guns themselves, it's that they have the names of what they actually are in real life, or at least what you've seen before in a game like Call of Duty, for example. Because most of these guns you've already seen before in other games, so it's not like they should just be changing up the names, because you know what the names of these guns are, like the M4, the M16, like so many other names that you have seen so many times in so many of the different Call of Duty games in the past. The attachment system, I think, also leaves something to be desired, because for the most part, the attachments are all the same for every gun, and their statistics are all the same depending on what it is that you are using. For example, the barrel extender attachment on most of the assault rifles and marksman rifles showcases some of the same statistics with increased higher power, mobility, and accuracy. I think it would probably be best to go back into the drawing table and make each one feel different so that you're not just using the same attachment for every single gun. And another negative I want to touch on in this notion is that there is no kill cam and streaks to be used. Now, For all we know, these will probably be in the game at launch. It just feels a little weird playing a first-person shooter game that doesn't have a kill cam. The streaks is not something that's new, considering a game like Halo, for example, already does something like that, although they have drops which just randomly come in on the map for you to pick up and fight for. I saw someone on Twitter say that specialists in this game in a way are kind of like the streaks that you would earn in an other game like Call of Duty. To that point too, I will say again, a good segue to this is that I'm a little tired of these specialist and hero shooter games. I think this genre is getting a little overdone at this rate. It's kind of like talking about Battle Royale. I don't think we need every game to have a Battle Royale. I don't think every game needs to be an extraction shooter, and I certainly don't think that every game needs to be a hero shooter. We've had plenty of those already. Since we are on the topic of hero shooter, again, you can only play so many games like Rainbow Six Siege, Overwatch, and even something like Valorant, which is just a hero shooter version of CSGO. The specialists themselves are not even very original and compelling either. Some of the things you can do you've already seen before in other games. It also takes you a long time to get them unless you are just doing very well, which if you do very well, you'll probably get them at least once or twice during a game. So again, not something I'm totally on board with, but this is just a standard I feel like nowadays with modern multiplayer gaming. You'll probably just find that there is going to be many different games like this that come out in the future. The last thing I mentioned as a bad, which I only felt it during the first day, was the fact that the game itself was a little rough from a server perspective and a connection point of view. Thankfully though, they were really fast and fixed it up for the second and third days going into Friday. So basically, those are overall all my thoughts on the bad and the good, and to kind of give some closing thoughts here, basically what I'm saying is that the gameplay leaves a lot to be desired, and honestly, I don't want to be harsh here, but it does feel very plain, bare bones, and generic so far. It feels like your typical shooter, or in this case, hero shooter, that's missing a lot for you to want to keep playing it. I'm just not that on board with it as I think a lot of other people are. I do feel like there aren't enough people who are giving constructive criticism towards this game and are only saying it's good because they want to counter Call of Duty for just being bad. And for the record, I'm in agreement there. I think Call of Duty, at least from the last several games that we have had, has been really bad and mediocre. But that doesn't mean I should use that as a way to just say that the other games are good. I do think that this game has a lot of great potential to be a game that some could look at as being the Splitgate of a Call of Duty style game. Basically what I mean by that is that it will feel like it's a Call of Duty style game akin to what Call of Duty is, but just not in name. Splitgate was a game that mirrored some of the things that you could do in Halo, even though it wasn't actually Halo. At the same time, I also think it's just a game that you might come back to play for a little while, but then you'll get bored of it and just go on to play another game. I don't think the game is like super boring, I just think that there's not enough here to really satisfy someone like me. I don't know if I would really find myself playing a game like this all the time. I know there are people out there who find enjoyment in just playing a shooter game that doesn't try to do too much, but for me, you can only do so much here before it kind of gets a little tiring and stale. Again, these are just my thoughts on the beta, and I'm sure there will be tons more to do when the actual game drops, as we already know that there's going to be a classic prestige system that comes into the game sometime after launch. We are getting more modes when it drops and more guns and content with these newer different seasons that come out every 3 months. As all these betas go, this was really just a showcase of what you could see and to allow the developers to test things out for the players to experience so that they can go and make changes. Thankfully as well, it is a free-to-play game, so most people don't have to worry too much about it when it drops, so that it doesn't feel like you're spending a ton of money on something that isn't finished, or at least should be finished. I still believe that this game should have at least 95% of what it should have on release, so we'll just see what happens when it fully releases later in the summer. That's basically going to do it for me. Again, I really appreciate if you left your comment down below and gave me all your thoughts on the game so far, and if you agree or disagree with me, so please do that and also do it respectfully. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new here. Again, comment down below, that would really help me get into the algorithm and I would appreciate the support. I hope you all have a great weekend and I'll see you all in the next video. This is Orion, signing out.